Our opening words this morning are from Polish poet Wisła Szymborska. A few words on the soul. We have a soul at times. No one's got it nonstop for keeps. Day after day, year after year may pass without it. Sometimes it will settle for a while, only in childhood's fears and raptures, sometimes only in astonishment that we are old. It rarely lends a hand in uphill tasks, like moving furniture or lifting luggage or going miles in shoes that pinch. It usually steps out whenever meat needs chopping or forms have to be filled out. For every 1,000 conversations, it participates in one, if even that, since it prefers silence. Just when our body goes from ache to pain, it slips off duty. It's picky. It doesn't like seeing us in crowds or hustling for a dubious advantage and creaking machinations that make us sick. Joy and sorrow aren't two different feelings for it. It attends us when the two are joined. We can count on it when we're sure of nothing and curious about everything. Among the material objects, it favors clocks with pendulums and mirrors, which keep on working even when no one is looking. I won't say where it comes I won't say where it comes from or when it's taking off again, though it's clearly expecting such questions. We need it, but apparently it needs us for some reason too.
Come, whoever you are. Come, whoever you are. You've broken your vows 1,000 times. Lover of leaving, ours is no care of her love despairs. Come yet again, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no care of other despair. Come, whoever you are, leaving. Ours is no care of come yet again, come. Times you've broken your vows, yet again, you've broken your vows.
Good morning. Welcome to Minnesota Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. My name is Laura Thompson. I'm the minister here. It's a joy to be with you all this morning. We welcome all of our visitors from near and far who are joining us as part of our UU Summer Collaborative. I invite you to use the chat here on Zoom or on YouTube to say where you're from, say hello from whatever town or city or hamlet you are joining us from this morning. If you're interested in learning more about Minnesota Valley UU Fellowship, we invite you to fill out the link in the chat for our visitor form. I am joining you this morning from my home in St. Paul, as our sanctuary is not set up for video recording today, and I didn't want to lug all the lights out in order to make that happen. So I live in St. Paul. My house is not far from Indian Mount Park, which for over a century, St. Paul regarded as a recreation area. As of this month, though, this is a big celebration, it's being recognized for its history and ancient status, also as a cemetery for at least 7 tribes that include the Upper and Lower Sioux, Shakopee, Mendawakatan Sioux, Prairie Island Indian Community, the Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin, Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sisseton Wahpeton Oieti community. All of those places that we join from today are the home ancestral lands of those tribes that I mentioned, and other tribes as well. May we continue to acknowledge them as such in all of the best ways we can, from facing our own traumatic histories and working to better celebrate the multicultural realities of the people who call this land home. And may we also work to be in better relationship with the land itself. This is part of the work that we come together to do as a faith community, or as a collaborative as we are today. And so it is important that we name this as often as we can. We also come together today to honor our own faith and our own traditions, for they are a grounding source for us. And so I ask you to join me in today's chalice lighting. The words for the chalice lighting should be printed over in the chat area. If you have a candle or a chalice to light where you are, I invite you to do so, and maybe hold it up where everybody can see it if you want to, and join me in the words. May the lighting of this chalice be a symbolic beacon, guiding us to love, to justice, to a deepening of the spirit. See chalices being lit everywhere. It's wonderful. At Minnesota Valley, we set aside time each week to lift up the joys and sorrows of those who have gathered. I invite you to type it in the chat, and I will do my best to keep up with it. You can also raise your hand if you'd like to share in person, and I will call on you. You can raise your hand down along the bottom. You'll see where it says reactions. If you click on that, there should be a raise your hand option. And we invite you to share whatever joys, sorrows, concerns, celebrations are going on in your life today. And while people are gathering their thoughts on that, I'll mention that we do have a service, a celebration of life for George Fairman at Minnesota Valley and on YouTube this Thursday at 3 o'clock. Katie Johnson shares that her sister-in-law's mother, who's 97, is experiencing some medical concerns. We'll hold her in our thoughts. I'd like to lift up my my wife's aunt is experiencing stroke-like symptoms, cognitive stuff, but it wasn't a stroke. They're not sure what it is, so they think it might be medication. So thoughts for her as they figure out what's causing her issues. I also want to lift up all of those who are dealing with environmental disasters this season. The fires in the West are terrible, as we have noticed from our own hazy skies. It's absolutely. And I also want to lift up, there are other parts of the world that are having issues with flooding recently in Europe. And so we lift up all of those who are in harm's way. And again, a reminder to commit ourselves to the work of environmental justice. We want to lift up Bev Montgomery, who's here this morning, but suffering from shingles. Oh, may all good healing and thoughts go to her. Celebration, it looks like last evening, oops, my scrolling is going, at Michael Servita's Delphi group played a concert in person at Springbrook Park in Fridley, and wow, it was wonderful. Merle Danuccio rejoices in their new great-grandson Miles, born last Monday. Oh yeah, and the Boundary Waters canoe area is also in a dangerous spot. You know, it goes without saying that we mention our own situation here, that we are in a drought. You know, I grew up in California, and it's so strange when Minnesota's in a drought. I don't expect it here, and yet here we are. So thoughts and prayers and hopes for safety in our own state, and for rain for the farmers who are living here, and they need it, and of course we need it because we depend on the farmers. Is there anything else that anybody would like to lift up today? We know that we hold so many other things in the silence of our hearts, and so we lift those into this space as well. And I'll ask that you all join in our song response as it will come up on your screen. Oop.
And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a need to be together. We have our hearts to give, we have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer.
And thanks to Lark, who's our in-house pianist, and Nicole Collins, who's our choir director. It's always lovely to hear her voice. I want to share this meditation with you today that was actually words shared by Liz Loeb, who is, she works at Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. She is a queer Jewish activist who is fierce and wonderful. And she shared these words at a gathering the other day. And she, before I read her words, just a little education, she uses the word tushaba, which is a Hebrew word that in Hebrew it literally means return, referring to the return to God, but it's often translated as repentance. So teshuvah, when I mention that, is repentance. Liz shared these words. And I just kind of invite you to maybe find a comfortable spot and let them fall on you and find you as they may. 1,000,000 years ago, and what sometimes feels like another lifetime ago, I had the privilege of studying quantum physics. I learned that we are made of stardust and that time and space and the galaxy are infinite and unknowable and real and magnificent all at once, that all life and the possibility of life consists at its core of relationships and change, that all of our actions have an impact, that impact extends beyond any measure of our horizons, and that matter is not solid at all. We are not solid at all. We are made of constant motion, of oscillating electrical charges that spin and spin in a web of interconnection and interdependence. The being I call me or you was created by thousands of years of light traveling in all directions. I tell you this in order to invite you to feel the resonance and magnetic field of your body. What I mean when I say that every molecule in me and in you and in us carries the memory of right relationship. When we become part of a movement to stop a pipeline, to join water protectors, to fight for native sovereignty and treaty rights, to honor the water, to create a just transition to sustainable and renewable resources rooted in racial justice and an end to white supremacy, we are doing the work of coming home to ourselves. We are fueling liberation with the gorgeous fire of our sensual desire. We are doing teshuvah on a cosmic scale. Thank you, Liz, for those beautiful words and for sharing them with those of us who weren't able to be at that event this last week. I'd like to share with you also another quote this morning. This is about the spiritual practice of generosity, and it's from Archbishop and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Desmond Tutu. I've adapted the quote to include the words "or the universe," where the Archbishop refers to God. This is from his book, God Has a Dream. The Archbishop writes, like humility, generosity comes from seeing that everything we have and everything we accomplish comes from God or the universe's grace and love for us. In the African understanding of Ubuntu, our humility and generosity also comes from realizing that we could not be alive, nor could we accomplish anything without the support, love, and generosity of all people who have helped us to become the people that we are today. Certainly, it is from experiencing this generosity of God or the universe and the generosity of those in our life that we learn gratitude and to be generous with others. As we set aside space this morning for our offering, we open space for you to practice gratitude and generosity. We are exploring the theme of spiritual practice today, and already we've had Come Come Whoever You Are, that great prayer by Rumi that's set to music that feels like a practice to so many of us. We've had words from Liz Loeb reminding us that our social action work can be a form of spiritual practice. We've had Archbishop Tutu reminding us that gratitude and generosity are a spiritual practice. And we're going to continue that theme with our own Maria Bevere, who's going to share some of her thoughts on spiritual practice.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Maria, and I'm the Children, Youth, and Family Ministry Director at Minnesota Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I'd like to take a moment to speak to the families and the children in particular. One of my favorite memories of summer was when my child and I would ride on our bikes every week to the playground. We'd meet our friends there, and we'd visit and play and have a picnic. It was so much fun to take that time to ride our bikes, visit our friends, and get some good exercise. One week, we were on our way to the playground, and we arrived there, and our friend asked us, "Can you please help me learn how to ride my new bike?" And Eli and I thought about it a minute, and we were like, oh, what can we tell her? What tips can we give to try to help her learn how to ride her bike on her own? Practice. Week after week, she practiced. We helped her, and it took a long time. Can you think of something else that requires practice? What else do you have to try and try again to figure out how to do? One thing I can think of is reading. It takes a lot of practice. Video games, you get a new one, you need to spend a lot of time practicing. Baseball takes a lot of practice, hand-eye coordination. And swimming, learning to swim takes a lot of practice. Sometimes practice is the best part. Eli and I were cheering for our friend as she got closer and closer to riding her bike on her own. I remember enjoying practices when I was a kid, oftentimes more than the swim meets that I was participating in. Practice can remind us of the cycles of the seasons, like winter, spring, summer, fall. So we start with winter, spring, summer, fall, and then it repeats again, winter, spring, summer, fall. That sounds like a calming repetition and a cycle of life that could be a helpful practice. Think of a ball. When you're playing with it, you can bounce it and catch it, bounce it and catch it, bounce it and catch it. That repetition is calming, and it can be a reminder of the cycle of the seasons. How about this spinner? I know our kids at MBUUF love spinners. They can be calming. They can remind us of cycles and how we're all in this together, because the circle never ends. Another thing we can practice is calming breathing. I'd like to share with you a calming way of breathing that I like. It's called square breathing. Does it remind you of the square chalice I have lit over here? You can breathe in up one side of the square, hold your breath for a little bit, and then breathe out and hold. So breathe in, you can almost see your belly move because you're breathing so deep. Then you can hold your breath and breathe out. Let's try it together. Hold, 2, 3, out. Hold, 2, 3. Breathe in. Hold, 2, 3, out. 2, 3, hold, 2, 3. And you can repeat that at your own pace. Notice how it can be calming. And remind us of the cycles of the seasons and remind us that we're all in this together. Thank you for practicing square breathing with me.
Thank you, Maria. So let's talk about spiritual practice. It's kind of, I think people have a lot of questions about it sometimes. So what is it? Why is it important? How do you do it? And how often should you do it? All right. What is it? All right, let's break it down. This is my definition for spirituality. Spirituality is that it is the nature or value of your relationship with everything that is beyond yourself. It's your relationship with other people, all other people, including ancestors and those who have yet to be born, including those that you have some connecting details with and those which you think you have none, parentheses, there really is no one that you aren't connected with under the umbrella of spirituality. But you might think that you're not connected to them, but really you are. Likewise, it's your connection to all living things. Again, past, present, future. It's your connection to all the elements, fire, earth, air, and water. It's connection to plants and minerals, to stars and planets, to movement, to change, to everything. It's your relationship to all that is or was or will be, to all that is known or unknown, to infinity, and to omnipresence right now in this moment. To be a spiritual being is to have an awareness of those relationships and those connections. Our spirituality is then shaped and expressed in our beliefs, in our faith, sometimes in religions. That's a common way to express your spirituality. It is where our greatest hopes are born, where our compassion resides. It's also where our deepest sorrow and grief reside, because spirituality is about relationships. Because it's about that, it's also where our love for one another grows. All human beings are spiritual beings because all human beings have an awareness of their relationships with everything that is outside of the selves. Our lives are as spiritual as they are physical or intellectual, or maybe even more. French philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin contended, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Spiritual practice, then, is any exercise that we engage with intention regarding our spirituality. Intention is a necessary component of spiritual practice. You can't have spiritual practice without intention. You might have an unintentional spiritual experience or even a life-changing spiritual awakening without intention, but for spiritual practice, you need to have clear intention. And the intention is practice, just practice. The intention is not to be better or smarter or become more enlightened, though those things may happen. The intention is just to practice being aware of your connections. That is your goal when you're doing spiritual practice. Why? Why do we do it? Well, as I mentioned, it could make you better or smarter or lead you to some more enlightened existence. Spiritual practice can do this, and it can do other things. It can also reduce your stress, can reduce pain and anger, it improves memory function, it lowers your blood pressure, it invites you to become more patient and compassionate, it allows you to a clearer path of forgiveness and acceptance of yourself and others, reduces feelings of helplessness. It can help in treating addiction, mental and physical health conditions as part of a larger health care plan. Now, if you want to go global, we could postulate that spiritual practice engaged on a global scale could help in poverty, hunger, war, hate, oppression, fascism, probably a lot of other human-made harm. So there are unending reasons why to do spiritual practice. Unending. But for the sake of keeping it simple, engaging in spiritual practice regularly can generally improve your overall well-being in the same ways that exercise benefits your body, that learning benefits your mind, that having somebody to talk to benefits your emotional well-being. Regular spiritual practice can help you feel grounded and rooted while at the same time letting you soar beyond your current spatial limitations. Great. So that's what it is and what it can do. So how do you do it? It's the tricky part. The most important thing to note here is the word practice. You just practice it. There is no goal of mastery. There is no box that you get to check off that you're done with spiritual practice. Again, it's just like exercise. You keep jogging or lifting or practicing yoga. There is no done. You don't get to check off, oh, I took a walk, a long hike. Now I'm done exercising for the rest of my life. No, doesn't happen. Doesn't happen with spiritual practice. Your health. You might get a COVID vaccination, but that doesn't mean you skip your physical or quit taking your medication, right? So the first thing that you need to do is put the words practice in capital letters in your head, and don't get hung up on thinking that you need to become like the Dalai Lama or Yoda. It's worth it that you just do it for the sake of you and your health. And just keep doing that over and over again. Trust me, you're worth it. Your health, your overall health is worth it. So let's look at a couple of common spiritual practices. Probably the most two engaged practices are meditation and prayer. Both of these practices involve slowing down and paying attention to what's going on right now. With prayer, we focus on what's going on with us and others, and we name our feelings around it and send those thoughts out into the universe or wherever. Now, I know that prayer is sticky for folks, so you might be saying, Laura, who are you praying to and why? You might get stuck on those thoughts anytime there's a prayer situation going on. I know this happens a lot with some Unitarian Universalists. So who or what am I praying to when I am doing such? I have two answers to that. The first is, I don't know. I'm going to repeat that. Who am I praying to? I really don't know. The second answer is, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me also that I don't know. I should also add that it shouldn't be your concern who or what anyone is praying to, because that's their spiritual practice, and we all have different beliefs when it comes to that stuff. And some of us like to pray even though we don't know who or what we're praying to, because what's important is that we're just naming the things that are close to our heart. Why? Again, all those reasons I told you, because it can relieve stress, help ground us, improve our health, save the world, yada, yada, yada. So it's a good thing, right, to name those things and be engaged in the practice for the sake of the practice. Don't get hung up on other things beyond it. Prayer can be a personal thing or a communal thing, like saying a few words of gratitude before a meal. It can be short, thank you, or rambling on and on and on. It can be formal, like a written prayer, like the Lord's Prayer, or familiar. That's what my prayers sound like. I don't know who I'm talking to or what I'm saying, so I just name what's on my heart, and it's kind of awkward and rambling and familiar. It can be recited or made up. It can be silent or spoken or even sung. It isn't a practice that everyone likes, though it is the most common one that we're invited into in public spaces. If it's not your thing, but it comes up in the Sunday service or an event that you're at, you can still be spiritually present simply by acknowledging your relationship to others to whom the practice is important and just being respectful and thoughtful while they name what's on their heart. Or you could be respectful and thoughtless during time of the offered prayer and use those moments to meditate. Now, if you thought prayer seemed elusive, let me introduce you to the equally elusive practice of meditation. This is truly a thoughtless act, pun intended. Well, it's not even an act because you're trying to do nothing. So it's a thoughtless nothing. That makes sense, right? Meditation is the practice of being in the present moment and setting all your thoughts aside, which is way harder to do than it sounds. There are many kinds of meditations: silent, walking, chanting, guided meditation, to name a few. You can meditate in a sitting pose, laying in the grass, standing by a tree, sitting in a tree, floating in the water. You can meditate with others or alone. The breathing practice that Maria taught us earlier is a good one. You can also just count every inhale or exhale as far as you can go. When you realize that you've lost count due to those thoughts creeping in, you just start over and repeat. Count and count and count until you realize that you're thinking about what you're going to make for dinner and you've been thinking about it for 2 minutes. And then you're like, oh, I need to let that go. And then you start counting again. I have thoughts that creep in all the time when I do meditation. So my favorite meditation practice is a senses meditation because I am able to focus on those things. So that's what I like to do. So I'm going to share that with you. We'll do a little bit of it. So to do this, you're simply going to focus on your senses one at a time. So we're going to give it a try. I'm going to invite you all that have cameras on to turn them off. And I'm going to turn mine off too, because you don't want to be distracted by other visual things, right? Okay. So cameras off, and I'll remind us to put them back on when we're done. First, just close your eyes and take a few breaths to relax. Feel your shoulders, just kind of like feel your body loosening and just feel comfort. Let go of any tension areas that you have. Another deep breath. And then the first thing that you focus on, and we'll just spend, half a minute doing this. I want you to just focus on smell. Is there anything that you can smell where you are? And you just name those things. What do you smell? After I've spent a moment or two with smell wherever I am, then I move to taste. And I think, what tastes are lingering in my mouth, or are there tastes in the air where you are? So just spend a few seconds with that. What do you taste? And if you don't have much taste, you can also just notice, the feeling of your mouth. And you just spend a moment or two with that. And then next, move on to what do you hear? So let's just be quiet for a moment and Listen for what you hear and just kind of name to yourself everything that you can hear. Then you move on to what you can feel. How do you feel the seat beneath you? What do your feet feel? Are there any parts of your body that need attention? If you're outside, can you feel the breeze on your skin? Can you feel the warmth of the sun on you if you're near a window? Just focus on what do you feel physically. And then gently open your eyes and maybe focus on one area near you, preferably out a window if you have one nearby. And notice what you see. What shapes, colors, what movement. Notice where you see the light and the shadows. And if at any time during your senses meditation, if you notice one other sense peeking in, that's okay too. If you're focusing on how you feel and suddenly you hear a bird, notice that. It's okay to name that too, but it's all just about your senses. And that's it. That's the senses meditation that I like to do. You can go ahead and turn your cameras back on. I love to do this in my yard or in a park on a park bench. I've also done it several times on the city bus, which is a really interesting place to do it. This is the kind of practice that you want to do, not necessarily in your home, because I think in your home, you'll hear things in your home or see things in your home, and you will get distracted and go to your to-do list, like, oh, I need to dust that. Or, you'll see the fridge and again start thinking about what you're fixing for lunch or something. So I recommend that you do it in a natural setting or out a window. The smell and the feel are really nice when you do them outside, because I've done it even outside in the winter, because just the feeling of a breeze or the sun, even when it's snowy outside, or the taste of the snow or the smell of the snow. I mean, it's just really nice centering kind of a thing. This kind of practice makes you, or any kind of practice, makes you more aware of what is going on around you in the moment. So this is like a meditation / mindfulness practice, really. A similar meditation is body scan. Maybe some of you are familiar with a body scan. That's where you let your focus travel from your head or your toes. You start at one end and then you kind of like go through your whole body. and just notice how everything feels, and maybe even focus on letting it relax and just be rested at the same time. Again, these exercises are great for centering and relaxing, and also bringing you in greater awareness to your own place in the world, your own actions in the world, which again could lead to world peace if we all engaged it regularly, all of us. And finally, I want to talk about how often. So, how often should you do spiritual practice? Really? Every day. And I mean, just even for 5 minutes, when you think about how many minutes there are in a day, 5 minutes is not that long. If you could do a senses meditation, if you could say a prayer or grace before dinner kind of thing, or write in a gratitude journal right before you go to bed, just 5 minutes a day is a good place to start. And then you should also think of it as like a bigger maintenance schedule. So when we think about our physical health, for example, perhaps you do exercises or stretches every day, right? And you feed yourself every day. So you have this part of your spiritual practice as well. There's a little bit that you're going to do every day, but it also needs bigger things, right? So occasionally you do something bigger, like you have to go get your meds, or you have to go to the doctor, or something like that. It's the same thing with spiritual practice. You should also build in some bigger things that happen once in a while. Maybe once a month you could set aside half a day to take that senses meditation and go sit in a park for the morning, and in different parts of the park, and notice how you sense different things in different areas. Or spend a day, just kind of meditating or listening to guided meditations. There's lots of great apps for that. The Calm app is one that I recommend. Headspace has lots of good stuff on it as well. So you could try those things, maybe a little fuller once in a while. And then you could even plan something bigger, like maybe a 1 or 2 or even a bigger week-long retreat once a year, where you go just by yourself somewhere, find a cabin or a room. You can bring books to read that are nourishing, and think of that day or 2 or a few days time as just simply time to be present and nourish yourself and your spirit. And that's what spiritual practice is. And it's really different for every person. And I also want to invite you, there's a great book, I can't remember, I don't have it with me, called Everyday Spiritual Practices, which is available at the UU bookstore. I forget I think it's Scott, somebody that wrote it, but I'm not sure. If anybody knows, you can type it over in the chat. You can also look at the things that you're already doing and imagine what they would look like if they were a spiritual practice. For example, I used to be a chef, so I look at cooking as a spiritual practice sometimes. Not every time I cook, but like if I'm kneading bread or prepping a lot of vegetables, I might do that really mindfully and just like really think about, the ground that those seeds were in, and water, and all of the hands that touch them, and you could really spend time with that. You do the same thing if you're a knitter or somebody who works with fiber, because those things too were grown. You could do the same thing if you work with wood. You think about the life of the tree that was, and just kind of like spend a moment with that. So sometimes there are ways to make the everyday things that we do spiritual practice. You can engage that senses exercise when you're walking your dog for a minute. You don't even have to be sitting still for it. You don't want to close your eyes while you're walking your dog, but you could focus on, those kinds of things. So sometimes I think people think, oh, a spiritual practice means I have to like sit in a cross-legged pose and navel gaze, or I have to be prayerful with beads and all of these kinds of props. And I mean, you can think about ways that you can have the things that you're already doing, how you can turn them into spiritual practice, as as far as you want. Think about your consumerism as a spiritual practice. There's a challenge. It'll drive you nuts, actually. But do it once in a while. Try it once in a while for one product, and you'll see what I mean. So everything can be engaged as a spiritual practice, or the basic ones can be engaged as a spiritual practice. So if you don't have a practice already, I invite you to explore them. If you need help figuring out what might work best for you for a spiritual practice, that's what we ministers are here for. So you can always contact one of us and ask us if we have recommendations. We can talk to you and help get a feel for where you're at and what might work well for you. And that's what we're here for. So reach out to us. Or reach out to the folks in your congregation that you know already engage in practice. Ask them about their practice and what it means to them and how it benefits them. And if you're somebody who already does that, share with others what you get out of it, and then maybe we can get more folks doing it. And again, then maybe that makes the world a better and more healing place, which is what we're all after. So thank you. We're going to close today with a hymn. This is from the UU Church of Los Alamos, and they've done a beautiful job with the hymn from the Gray Hymnal, The Lone Wild Bird. So please enjoy this from the UU Church of Los Alamos. Will you all please join me in the words for extinguishing our chalice, which should be shared over in the chat. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Until we meet again, be loving and be loved, be blessed and be a blessing, knowing that everything we need to heal ourselves and the world around us lies within and among us. Blessed be and amen. I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. We're going to have some social breakout rooms here in a minute. I know some of you have your own breakout rooms, so if you're leaving to go to that, that's great. If you're leaving to go do other things that you need to do today, that's great too. Those of you that remain, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. Just a second here. Give it just a few more seconds to let people go if they're going.